Chase. Because he draws others in without saying a word. Welcome to Infinite Storyverse, where we don't just tell stories. We peel back the layers of restraint, longing, and the human need to be seen, even when being seen changes everything. The silence in the classroom that afternoon felt different. Not peaceful. Not routine. It was a silence that seemed to hum just under the surface, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to crack. The golden light filtering through the windows gave everything a soft glow. Dust particles floated lazily in the sunbeams, drifting through the stillness like they, too, were watching. I sat alone at my desk, red pen in hand, essays stacked in uneven piles around me. The smell of dry paper and coffee lingered, familiar and grounding. I needed grounding. I had stayed behind after the last bell, as I often did, correcting essays and trying not to think too hard about how quiet my life had become. That's when I heard it. A knock. Not loud. Not urgent. Just hesitant. Like whoever was on the other side wasn't sure if they were supposed to be here. I glanced up. Jake. He stood in the doorway, one hand still resting on the frame like he was holding himself back. He had always had that quiet kind of presence. Not the loudest in class, never one to joke for attention, but he had a gravity. Something in his eyes always looked a little older than the others. Something in the way he asked questions, not just for grades, but to understand the why behind things. This time, he wasn't here to ask about the assignment. "Hey," he said, barely above a whisper. "Do you have a minute?" I nodded, setting down my pen. "Of course." He stepped in slowly, the door closing behind him with a soft click that somehow felt louder than it should have. As he crossed the room, I noticed it, a shift in his energy. Not nervous, not exactly. But focused. Measured. Like he'd been rehearsing this moment. He sat down across from me, resting his hands on his thighs, eyes not quite meeting mine. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "I wanted to talk about something," he said. "Something personal." My first thought was that something was wrong. Maybe family stuff. Maybe stress. Students had come to me before about everything from anxiety to heartbreak. It was part of the job, or so I told myself. Part of being the adult who's always just there. "I'm listening," I said gently, keeping my voice soft. He looked up then, and in his eyes, I saw something I wasn't prepared for. Not distress. Not confusion. Certainty. "I think." He paused. A breath. A blink. Then the words fell out, slow and controlled. "I think I'm in love with someone." I smiled, instinctively. A reflex. "That's a big feeling," I said, my tone staying light. "Is it someone at school?" He didn't blink. Didn't smile. "It's you." For a second, maybe less, the entire room stopped breathing. My ears rang with silence. My hands froze against the edge of the desk. Thoughts clashed inside my head, too many to process all at once. No. No, he didn't just say that. But the look in his eyes said he meant every word. And the worst part? I didn't feel shocked. Not in the way I should have. Not in the way that would have protected us both. I stood quickly, needing space, needing the air. I walked toward the window like I could climb out of this moment if I just reached far enough into the sky. My reflection stared back at me in the glass. Tired eyes. Faint lines I kept pretending I hadn't noticed. A woman married to a man who hadn't kissed her like he meant it in over a year. Behind me, Jake's voice was quiet, but firm. "I know it's not right," he said. "I know what this looks like. But I also see the way you look at me sometimes." I wanted to tell him he was wrong. That he'd imagined it. That he was young and confused and reading too much into gestures and glances. But I didn't. Because he wasn't wrong. I had looked. I had noticed him, more than I ever should have. But noticing isn't the same as acting. I couldn't let it be. I turned back to him. Jake, I said his name like a warning, like a prayer. I wasn't sure which. I'm married. He nodded, slowly. Yeah. I know. But you're also invisible in that marriage. I see you. His words landed like a stone in a still lake. Ripples moved through me, unsettling everything I thought I had under control. And then, he did the most respectful thing he could have done in that moment. He left. Just like that. No drama. No push. Just quiet conviction, and the echo of everything I didn't say chasing him down the hallway. That night, I lay awake in the dark. Eric, my husband, was in the guest room again. He'd been sleeping there more and more, claiming his back hurt, the mattress too soft. But I knew better. Distance had become our comfort zone. And silence our shared language. Lying there, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't stop replaying Jake's voice in my mind. You deserve someone who sees you. It shouldn't have mattered. It shouldn't have touched me the way it did. But it did. And once something like that touches you, really touches you, it doesn't go away. It just waits. Part 2, the note that knew too much. The next few days passed like I was watching my life through a window. Everything looked the same, lesson plans, morning coffee, hallway greetings, but something had shifted. Something I couldn't name yet, but felt in every breath. And Jake? Jake was different too. He didn't linger after class anymore. Didn't look at me the way he used to. Didn't ask the thoughtful questions that always made me feel like my words actually mattered. Instead, he became distant, polite but absent. He avoided eye contact. He left the room with the rest of the students without a single glance back. And I should have felt relief. But instead, I felt a sharp, cold ache I hadn't expected. I missed him. I missed the attention. The emotional gravity that had pulled me out of the quiet fog I'd been floating in for years. It wasn't about him being younger. It wasn't even about romance, not yet. It was about being noticed in a way that felt real, unfiltered, alive. Then Thursday came. The class moved as usual, papers were handed in, lectures delivered, laughter bubbling in the background of half-listening teens. But Jake didn't speak once. Not until the very end. When the final bell rang and students filed out in waves of backpacks and half-spoken plans, he stayed behind. No words. No eye contact. Just a folded piece of paper placed gently on the corner of my desk. His fingers brushed the surface for a second, like the paper was fragile, before he turned and left the room without a word. I stared at it. My heart pounded in my chest. There was nothing innocent about this note. It carried weight. Deliberation. It wasn't just passing thoughts. It was a decision. I waited until the hallway was clear. Until I knew I was truly alone, before I opened it. The poem was handwritten. Neat, controlled lines. Each word purposeful. Each phrase carved like it had been pulled from somewhere deeper than his age should have allowed. She doesn't know she glows when she thinks no one's watching. She doesn't know her silence is louder than the sun. She speaks in fragments of restraint. And I want to be the sentence she never says out loud. I dreamt of tracing the curve of her thoughts. Of kissing the places she hides behind long sleeves and tired eyes. And if she ever lets me in, I won't just love her like a woman. I'll see her like she's never been seen. My hand shook. Not because I was afraid. But because it was beautiful. Too beautiful. Too real. Too much. It wasn't just a confession. It was a mirror, one that reflected things I had been burying for too long. I didn't throw it away. Didn't report it. Didn't even tell myself the lie that I would forget about it. Instead, I folded it neatly and tucked it into the back of my notebook, like something precious I wasn't ready to face, but couldn't bear to lose. That weekend, Eric left for a cabin trip with his brothers. Another excuse. Another escape. He barely looked at me when he left. A quick peck on the cheek. A distracted goodbye. No, I'll miss you. No trace of a man who once memorized every detail of my smile. By Saturday afternoon, the silence in the house was too loud. Every room echoed with a kind of emptiness I couldn't unfeel. I told myself I'd go for a walk. I told myself I just needed air. But instead, I found myself opening my phone. And messaging Jake. I don't even remember what I wrote. Something vague. Something safe on the surface, a thank you for the poem, maybe. A note of acknowledgement. But he replied almost instantly. Can I see you? That one line knocked the breath out of me. Not because it was bold, but because I wanted to say yes. And I did. God help me, I did. 35 minutes later, I opened my front door. And there he was. Jake stood in the soft glow of the porch light, no arrogance, no swagger. Just presence. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. I wore sweatpants and a loose tank top, no makeup, no preparation, thinking it would protect me from doing something reckless. But when I saw the way he looked at me, like I was something luminous, rare, worth crossing every line for, I felt my resolve crack, right down the center. We didn't speak much. Not at first. We sat on the couch, side by side. The air between us heavy with unsaid things. And then, slowly, his hand found mine. And the electricity that had been simmering between us finally surged. When he leaned in, I let him. When he kissed me, I didn't pull away. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't desperate. It was reverent. He kissed me like I was something sacred. Like every second had weight. Like every breath was a vow. And for the first time in years, I let myself feel. We stayed there, curled together in the quiet, long after the fire had died down. No words. Just heartbeats. Just skin and closeness and the dizzying awareness that this moment was not reversible. At some point, he whispered against my neck. I don't regret this. And the ache that had lived inside me for so long whispered back. Neither do I.